Well, hey guys, welcome to the channel and another stream. It's actually not a stream, so I don't know why I say that. I think I just said it out of habit. But it's another chapter working on this guy right there. That's our USAF B-2A Spirit Stealth Bomber by Model Collect. 1/72 scale kit. We'll run the intro, get into it. Okay, so we are back, and this might be a short video, it might not be. I'm actually not filming this live because it just might be a really short video and it's not really worth doing it live. You guys might notice this little thing right here. This is a different, I'm experimenting with a different camera setup. Unfortunately, in this view, it puts the camera right in my face. So yeah, but the good news is I don't spend a lot of time on this view anyway. So what are we doing? What are we doing? We're painting. We have the bird all fully assembled, and so we need to paint it. As you might be able to tell on the camera, I have done some sanding on this guy, and so it's ready for some primer. I already am anticipating that I'm gonna have to touch up a little bit of the white inside the bomb bay due to overspray. It is what it is. It's no big deal. So it'll actually be a lot easier to mask off this whole area and redo the white than it is to do the opposite. Anyway, she's all sanded. I got the putty that I put on the tip as the wings. That's all sanded down nice and smooth. We're going to see how it looks when the primer's on there. So we're going to be priming with Mr. Surfacer 1500 Gray. You guys know a lot of times I do like a black base or something like that, primer at black. With this guy, because the color is kind of a dark color, we're not going with a lot of, you know, blotchy, bleached kind of looks to it. We're not doing the whole pre-shading thing. We don't need to do it because it doesn't really happen a lot on these guys. Because of the surface that they are on these, they just don't. So yeah, so we're gonna get that. I've got my air compressor already fired up. So that means it's just a matter of putting some paint in the cup and starting to spray. Now, because of the size of this thing, I'm going to use my trigger action spray gun. As you can tell, it's got a little dust on it. I don't normally do stuff in this size, so I don't normally need to spray that much, but this time we do. So this has got a 0.5 needle in it. This is the PS, what is this one? PS 290 GSI Krios trigger. So it sprays a nice like a fan pattern, almost like a normal spray gun does. So even though this one is also a 0.5, this doesn't spray a nice big pattern like that. And so we're gonna swap them out today and put this one in like that. Now it is dual action, so yeah, that's what we're gonna do. I do have my other camera set up behind me here, so we can get a look at this. You see what I picked up from the hardware store the other day, some Rust-Oleum. I know this will spark a big debate online about using Rust-Oleum products on models. This one is actually, this is Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch 2x Ultra Cover Gray Primer, also bonds to plastic. So I picked this one up because it bonds to plastic. So that's why I got this one. I'm not doing it on this plane. I'm going to stick with the Mr. Surfacer stuff because, well, just because I know this one works. I know this one lays down nice, especially mixing it with some leveling thinner, Mr. Color leveling thinner. Although she is pretty thin already, I've already got a bunch of thinner in that, so I probably don't need to use this. But I do know from experience this really uses a lot of paint when you're spraying with this one. And so I'm going to almost fill the cup because I know I'm going to be going through it like crazy. At least half a cup. Now it's already got a bigger cup than the other one. So I filled that up, and that's probably close to the similar size as the other cup. As you can tell by my other table here, I am working on other things like an Ed 209 and stuff like that. I do have other things going on. So before we start, the Bombay doors, I have those masked. The white part is masked on these, so these are ready to spray. But I want to just tack them down so that they stay when I spray. So I'm just going to take this, and we're going to go like this. Bing. You can see this is the same, happens to be the same box I used when I painted the white. So why not use the same one? Like, again, except now they're flipped over. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I haven't decided whether this is going to be a 2-part video or this will be its own video. I'm only going to do the primer right now. We're going to do the primer. We're going to let that dry and give it another little sanding, and just to see how everything looks on it. I might have to put more putty and stuff like that. Might need more Bondo. I don't know. We're going to find out after we get some paint done. So let me change the camera here, and we'll get going on here. Okay. Hopefully this isn't choppy. Looks like it's going to be okay. Yeah. Here we are. Obviously I got something else going on here. Look at that guy. Yep. I'm sure a lot of you guys recognize that. Okay, so we've got this. Do a little test spray. Yep, she works. Okay, I really should put a glove on, which I'm going to do that. Put a glove on. And I'm going to turn the fan on, because this one also gets a lot of paint in the air. So let's see here. Okay, so those are primered. That's done. Okay. Let's see how our bird's going to look. Now, before I actually commit to starting to paint this, I want to make sure my tape on the window is stuck down good and not lifting anywhere. So just give her another little push down, make sure everything's all good on that. Okay, we'll start on the top first. Why not? Okay, I'll do half. We'll flip her over. Well, not really flip her over. You know what I mean. Unfortunately, there's not really anything to grab onto on this bird. So start the edge. sure I kind of get in the engines here. Okay, so I got a pretty decent dry coat on that. Very light. I can see some of my sanding marks. I can still see some of my sanding marks in there. We're going to put on a thicker coat though, because I can still see a lot of my sanding lines. So I want to clean that up so you can see there. I'm not sure exactly if you can see if the camera's going to pick those up or not, but yeah, so we've got a good start, right? A good start. We're not done. We're not anywhere near done. Now, of course, there's nothing for me to grab on the bottom here. I can't even like stick my fingers in here because I'll break all the little bits off. So I kind of have to, let's just see how dry this is. Yeah, it'll let me grab onto it without really doing anything. So that's good. Alright, so unfortunately I got to change the angle on this, and you're not going to be able to see this side as well as easily as okay, that's not bad. Go again with a slightly slower. Get a little more coverage. putting it a little bit thicker around where I've had to put the putty. I want to get good coverage on the putty. Simply because I don't want the lighter color of the putty showing through when I actually start doing some painting. Looks pretty good, looking pretty uniform. Now, in spite of the fan, I'm going to have to pop open my window and make sure I'm not asphyxiating myself here. Okay, window's open, so we're going to get lots of ventilation now. You know, the Mr. Surfacer, since similarity to Mia, dries very fast. And again, I've got lots of sanding lines that are visible there. So we've got a lot of work to do with the sanding. Got a lot of sanding work to do. I'm going to do another coat over on this side to cover up my putty. So let's pour some more in there. Okay, so that is that. Now what I like to do, because this feels rough, just from the sheer spraying of it, so I like to go along with this, just with a cloth, and just take some of that off. Take some of that overspray off there, right away. Get rid of the overspray, and that already feels smoother, just doing that. comes off of that. Just by doing that, right? And that's just overspray. But it does feel rough. I do not like that. This should feel smooth. So I definitely got to get in there with some wet sanding and smoothing this thing out. We got a rough bird right now, and that's no good. So I'm going to do this side now. Same thing, just more. Actually, what I want to do, I feel like change camera. I feel like my thinner needs to be thinner. My primer needs to be thinned out a little bit, I think. I'm having to really pull back on the trigger to get it to spray, so she's not quite thin enough. So I'm just going to pour this back into the jar. Good enough. And we're going to add a little bit of leveling thinner to it. Mix back on here, shake her up good. Now it should be all mixed up. Now it should spray a little nicer. Even these guys feel rough on there, but that's okay. A little bit of wet sanding will fix that up pretty good. Okay, that's a little bit better. I just poured paint on my finger by tipping the airbrush back too far, which is why they have a lid. That's why they put lids on the cups, guys, so you don't do stuff like that. It's okay, it's okay. Change the camera back. And we'll continue. Okay. There's our first coat on that side. does seem to be spraying a little bit smoother, but still, I mean, if I had a choice, I would like the coverage to be better. I'd like it to cover more with one coat, but you know, you gotta thin it down so much. It's a trade-off. By thinning it, you don't cover as much. There's our first coat done. So now I've got to cover more, and I got to get in and cover up all my gray or white lines. So I'm just going to get in here right off the bat. this down. As I say done, and then I immediately put another coat on it. Okay. Looks, I think we're going to do a little here and then just in this section here. Okay guys, we have a very light gray Stealth Bomber. We have a very light gray Stealth Bomber now that needs a whole lot of love with some masking tape. Not masking tape. with sandpaper. She needs a lot of sanding because she's rough. She's a rough bird. And why is she a rough bird? She's a rough bird because I used a very coarse sanding paper. I used 180 grit sandpaper on her to give her a preliminary sanding. And so she's rough. So I gotta step that up. I gotta use like a 300 grit, a 500, 1,000 grit, 2,000 grit. I gotta get her sanded down nice and smooth and get rid of our sanding lines. So that is what I'm gonna spend the next, I don't know, hour or so doing. I'm gonna let this cure though. I'm gonna let that paint cure, and that's what we're gonna do, okay? So, I am going to clip the video about here and or around here, and I'm going to, we'll come back to me actually painting the color. How about that? Okay, getting some color on this. That's what we're going to cut to. Okay, so we'll see you guys in a little while. Okay,
one pair of pants later.
All right guys, we're back, and we're going to continue painting this guy. And yeah, we're going to continue painting now that he's all nicely primered. I gave her another nice wet sand with 1,000 grit sandpaper. As you can see now, we've got a little bit of detail. You can see where it, it exposes those raised panels and stuff like that on there. We changed the camera so you can see a little better here. Yeah, so you can see the little bit of panels where these lines, they're raised up, so sanding takes that primer away, but that's okay. Especially on the front here, like look at that, that's, yeah. But taking away that little bit of primer is not going to be any issue really, and so yeah, so it's going to look good. We are ready to finally put our first coat on and get this thing looking more like the color it's supposed to be. Okay, so I've got my air compressor fired up already. Now, as I mentioned before, I have my concoction of colors with XF53 and a little bit of German gray and a little bit of blue. So I mixed, it's about, I want to say, 60% XF53 and 40% German gray. Mixed those two together first, and that made a much darker version, which is what this is. And then I put about, once I had that, then I maybe added about 10 to 15 drops of just blue, and that's how I get this blue tint. So this is mixed up. We're gonna just give her another mix just to make sure that's all ready to go. Okay, we're not gonna mix it with my coffee, but I do want to make sure that it is thin enough. I want to add a little bit of Mr. Color leveling thinner into it, just a little bit. I don't need a lot, but I do want to put a little bit in there. It's already thinned, but it's thinned with just some regular thinner. So that was about 1 pipette's worth in there. The leveling thinner is just gonna, my boss would say, you can't say this word anymore. It's not politically correct. But leveling thinner has a retarder in it. Okay. Retarder, of course, it makes it so that it dries a little slower. And that's what the retardation is. Is that a hard R? Is that not politically correct? So we're gonna go back to our great big one, because we're going with great big areas to paint here. My big 0.5 trigger gun. I have to move my matrix of leadership out of the way here. So let's get some of this poured in. Okay. That's about half of the cup, which is about 70% of what I got in here. So hopefully I get enough. But the good thing is, because there are a few panels that I'm going to be painting that are not this color, we're going to do a little bit of color variations. I noticed in some still pictures online of some up-close shots of like the different panels, and they are different colors. As these things they age, they replace a panel here or there, they got to retouch it with paint, and of course it doesn't look the same shade of blue, gray blue, whatever you want to call it. So yeah. So that's what we're going to go for with this. So even though if I don't get full coverage with this and I run out, and whatever I remix, if it doesn't happen to be perfectly the same, it's all right. It's going to be perfect. It'll be great. It's going to add to that aged effect. Let me change. I've got my painting camera set up. Let's hope it works. And let's get to this. Okay, here we are. All right. So let me put a glove on, just so that I can make sure I'm not painting my hand. And putting my airbrush down, I managed to spill some paint. Okay. Alright guys. Let's see. Spray test. Perfect. Alright, let's start. Oh yeah, that's nice. Coverage is nice. Let's make sure we get the front edge. going for full coverage on this pass. I'm just getting some preliminary coat laid down here. Just to make sure I get my edges. She's starting to look like the color she's supposed to. Okay, so I'm gonna have to let this sit for at least, 10 seconds or so, and let this over here, I gotta let this dry because I gotta grab onto it from there. So yeah, woohoo! We've got to give it a minute. Gives me a chance to drink my coffee. And put my coffee down the wrong pipe. Yes. Okay. I'm just gonna do a little. Yeah, she's good here. Okay. All right, let's work on this side. Okay, so I have to make sure I get all the angles, because we've got little spots like in here where we've got a little bit deeper panel lines that you got to make sure the paint gets into, right? That's an important thing. You need to make sure that paint gets into your panel lines, otherwise it's going to be visible later on. We don't want white panel lines after all. Okay, I want to do another pass up front here. And along here. This kind of no man's land here in between everything. just ran out. So that's 1/2 cup done. Okay. So you're gonna let this sit for a minute or two, maybe 5. Let this kind of dry a little bit, and then we'll flip it over and we'll do the top half. Not to mention, can't forget our little Bombay doors. Those need to be done too. We can't forget about these. Okay. So, in fact, while I'm waiting for that to dry a little bit, we'll do our Bombay doors. And that is pretty much the last of this, which is a little unfortunate because I would have liked to have a lot more. I would have liked to have a lot more than what I do. So I'm just going to transfer this over here for now while that's just drying. And I'll just quickly spray these. I'll change the camera back when I get back to spraying the top of that. Doors are done. Okay. And that's all they need. Okay. Let's flip her over and start on the top side. It's beautiful. This paint dries quick. Just it's very similar to, well, it is to me. I was going to say similar to Tamiya, but it is Tamiya, right? Okay, so now we're going to do our top side. Okay, we'll start with that one. Let's change the camera back. Painting cam. Okay, so we'll do this side first here. Let's do our front edge. first layer down. First layer down, she's not complete. Some of these deep lines require different angles to get in there. Just ran out again. Okay. So, because I just ran out, I need to do a remix. Yeah. I don't know why I just did that, but I need to remix. So, alright, so we need to do some remixing. Okay. I need to take, where's my German gray? Right here. Okay, so I need to redo some of this because I need more paint. Literally, I need more paint. Okay, that's should be good to go now. I'm gonna just clean this edge off. Okay, it's looking pretty good. We're pretty close to the same color. Just gonna make sure my tip hasn't dried in here. And again, about half the cup, but I've got lots left over now. Okay, let's get back to painting. Let's get back to what we were doing here. Okay. means I kind of have to limit myself in where I grab and stuff like that, and how I do this exactly. So looking good. It's really hard to tell whether it's actually a different shade from underneath. I don't think you're going to be able to tell. You want another. Guys, that's it. All right, we have our bird done because she's painted. She's the color she's supposed to be. And I mean, realistically, I'd have to actually go back to my previous videos before I primered the thing to see if this is actually the same color as it used to be, because it looks really close. Unfortunately, you can see a little bit of my sanding marks from when I used the 180 grit sandpaper on it. So that's my bad. I shouldn't have used such a harsh sandpaper. But at the same time, once we get decals put on this thing, I mean, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet sand this again with a finer grit sandpaper, maybe like a 2000 grit. Or even if I use a sanding sponge, I could go up to 10,000. Just to wet sand it to take any overspray off, and to smoothen that out. And then we can lay some a nice gloss coat on it, and then put some decals down. And then after the decals, we can lay down a flat clear. Yes. Laying down the clear coats, though, I'm not going to bother putting those online. It's a pretty straightforward process. It's just like spraying clear on it. Yay, right? There's no special technique to it, other than what you just saw me do with the color. So that's where this video is done. We're going to end it here, guys. I want to thank you for watching. Thanks for coming out. Thank you for all the support, and yeah, that's it for painting the color. We're going to continue on with other things later on, guys, so we'll see you all in the next one.